Hey, everybody, welcome to a special episode of What Drives Us One-on-One. It's me, the guy in Southern California. Russell, you know me from, well, if you don't, I'm sorry. Let me apologize in advance. And if you do, no big deal. But the real point of this show is that we have with us, and by we, I mean me, really. It's just me and Matthew, Matthew Klippenstein, who you will know if you're a smart Twitterer and you're into renewables. He is electron.com, that's COMM, but he is not working for communications for any company. That com has a different reference. Matthew has been in clean tech for over 20 years. He is a hydrogen fuel cell engineer. He has worked in wind and solar consulting. In other words, Matthew knows a lot of stuff. Also, if you read Green Car Reports or the National Observer, you have seen his Canadian EV sales numbers, and you can thank him for that because he's the man who puts all that together. A thankless task, I'm sure. Matthew, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Russell.
I am hoping I'm going to leave here a much smarter person than I arrived. So I will tell you the exact impetus for this.
Sure.
I read an article by Bertel Schmidt in the Drive.
Right.
He interviewed the person, I guess he's a professor, running the fuel cell program for Toyota in Japan. And in the past, as much as I love Toyota, and I do, Toyota's kind of, how do we say this with love? Toyota's been very clingy to hydrogen, and it didn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Got it, yeah.
But some of the points that this professor for Toyota and Bertel made in the article were kind of opened my eyes. Maybe there is an optimistic path. Maybe there is a way that hydrogen fuel cells make sense. Now, we've talked in the show for years that hydrogen fuel cells for personal vehicles are very difficult. That's problematic for a number of reasons. Hydrogen fuel cells for things like commercial vehicles, super great idea.
Right.
Fixed filling points, depots, known routes, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess, Matthew, tell me, why have I been making unicorn jokes about hydrogen for all these years? Have I been wrong, or is it just now maybe coming to be true that hydrogen has a bright future?
I guess, sure. Maybe the right perspective to have would be that maybe next year when the second generation Mirai comes out, that's kind of like 10 years behind where battery electric vehicles have been. Because until the Leaf and the Volt came out in about 2011, late 2011 or late 2010 or 2011, that time frame, then there was really nothing. It was kind of, you had the bad taste from the EV1, which was kind of I know many people are really passionate about it, but it was a two-seater with a kind of a funny shape, not much storage space. And so 2010, 2011, when you have the Leaf and the Volt come out, that's really like, wow, these are for real now at decent production, respectable production volumes. And so what we're at right now with fuel cell vehicles is that early stage, very pre-commercial still. And with the new Mirai, you will start to see that 5-digit production per year level. Toyota and Hyundai in particular are particularly bullish on the technology. Now, that said, to take a little step back, you'd mentioned that Toyota has been clingy to hydrogen or hasn't embraced batteries quite as quickly as many/all of its competitors. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One, if you think of the disruptive innovation theory, I think it was Clay Christensen, is that people who lead in one technology are often slow to adopt the next big thing that comes along. And so Toyota led with hybrids. And even now with like the stricter and stricter European fuel efficiency requirements, it can totally meet those with hybrids. So it has been able to take its time. Its idea was, like everyone else, batteries are still expensive. So why would we ship out vehicles that we're going to lose money hand over fist on when, we can kind of keep on noodling around? Now they've gotten serious with battery electric vehicles, finally, or they're starting to at least. And so I think there's a valid criticism to be made that, yes, they haven't been as fast off the bat as everyone else. That said, they haven't had the need to be. If you think about Volkswagen or the German automakers in particular, their bread and butter is nice, luxury, sweet, excellent gas guzzling vehicles. And so Volkswagen is kind of the disruptor in this case, in that it has to go directly to battery electric vehicles in order to earn the credits to start, to try and stay in business, perhaps, or to avoid massive fines. I think Volkswagen's plan with its MEB platform, I think will and already is evidencing tremendous savings for them in terms of their ability to price electric vehicles competitively. I guess, yeah, so on that theme, yes, Toyota has been slow with battery electric vehicles. It hasn't had to be as fast / determined / desperate as, oh my God, we're going to be fined out of existence.
Right.
And so yes, they are having a battery electric push now. They've always been interested in hydrogen, and there are many knocks against hydrogen, particularly passenger vehicles, being that it's inefficient in that you have ideally renewable electricity, you generate hydrogen from it, and then you put it into the fuel cell, which has its own losses. And electric vehicle advocates will often note that, well, yeah, you can go 3 times as far with renewable electricity in a battery electric vehicle than a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. That is very true. Sadly, the nature of consumer products is that consumers tend not to change behavior very much. I think a lot of us are a little bit spoiled by the iPhone in that prior to the iPhone, no one thought anyone would accept typing on a screen, right? They thought you needed a physical keyboard like a BlackBerry.
Sure.
And the mundane reality is that you can't rely on that for many consumer goods. Beyond Meat is a great example. So just as a personal background, I went vegetarian for a number of years back in the 90s, just after high school. I met my wife, and we kind of, we came together as a compromise on, anything but red meat. So, I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to force my views on her. So I've seen Beyond Meat. I've eaten Beyond Meat type burgers for 20 years. I had one in Germany in 1999.
Wow.
Beyond Meat has rolled out in Tim Hortons in Canada. That's I guess I forget who owns it now in the States, but they later retrenched. They sold out initially, and then they retrenched, and they're only offering it in 2 provinces, Ontario and BC. And what that's telling me is, again, a lot of people will try it, and it is not a good business idea to assume your consumer will change to the new product. Now, I think with electric vehicles, people will, because they are better to drive. Most people, at least in North America, have their own house, their own garage. There are many other benefits, but in broad terms, if you're in a market that has to be conservative, and cars, if you make a mistake, that is just almost irrecoverable, then you have to be on the conservative side. So I would think that, if I was as a Volkswagen, I would follow exactly the path they've done. At the same time, if I was in Toyota 20 years ago, I'd follow exactly the path that they've done. Let other people see if they can bring the prices of batteries down. We're not getting fined. We can make compliance cars and not run afoul of authorities. And meanwhile, we've got this hydrogen thing. It is a zero consumer behavior difference. It is less efficient, but the general rule is you don't want to assume your consumer is going to change their behavior. So I would also add that on the consumer side, as much as people say they want to care about efficiency, most people, they kind of buy as expensive a car they want, or as expensive a lifestyle as they can get. Right. So, Priuses didn't outsell pickups just because they were more efficient. Now, I think that battery electric pickups, fantastic idea, plug-in hybrids even, I think those will do fantastically well. But again, it's a matter of Toyota had the option of not, of being careful and perhaps, in my own opinion, a bit too conservative. It had this opportunity with the Prius. You could make a plug-in version, all this other stuff. But seeing from where they started, I can see how they've arrived at where they are today. Now, one big difference between consumer markets and commodity markets being like commercial vehicles, trucks, buses, the like, is that commercial vehicles are strictly a total cost of operation environment. If you can save a few percent for your customer, you can go from like 0% to 100% for your particular technology fairly quickly. And so then I think it's understandable why there's a lot of enthusiasm that commercial vehicles, will rapidly shift over to electrification. Consumer vehicles, again, you're talking about consumers who aren't really that, no one's buying a Tesla because its TCO is lower than a Leaf. It's just not really
Right.
likely to be the case. Now, commercial vehicles, now we're getting into the areas where fuel cells begin to make a bit more economic sense, even on a TCO basis. There are a couple of things to note, and I did have a piece in the Drive a little while back. I think it was called the Bug with Battery Take All Thinking, and I'm not sure if you can attach the graphic, but if you think about the animal kingdom, small creatures tend to have exoskeletons. When you're small, when you're like an insect or a crab, the weight benefit of an exoskeleton, like that's where you want to be. But if you reach a certain size, like a mammal or a reptile, then everything is vertebrates. So in a similar way, you have batteries clearly are the best and ideal for smaller vehicles, cars on down. And then fuel cells, hydrogen, will tend to be preferable for larger vehicles on up. Some cars, but larger trucks, even commercial delivery vehicles. I believe it's a Smart Scooter, one of the DHL-related companies, had estimated that in the long term, 80 to 90% of their electric delivery vans would have a fuel cell range extender. So this allows them to use the battery for what they need, but then instead of cramming more battery, more weight, less cargo capacity, they would expect to for deliveries in between cities, say, things which aren't in an urban core, they would have a fuel cell range extender which trickle charges the battery effectively. So yes, you do get a cost. It's a cost and it's an efficiency loss, but it's a productivity gain. So yes, you are paying more for fuel, but you're allowing yourself to hold more cargo, and you're not, constraining yourself in that respect. And so I'd use that analogy to show that fuel cells and batteries are very complementary. Definitely, passenger car and smaller, you definitely have the advantage where batteries, make more sense. They're perfect. As you get larger, it will become a little bit more challenging to accommodate those.
Sure.
One other thing that has been noted a little bit in California here, will become more prevalent later on, is that with fuel cell infrastructure, with hydrogen, the sting is in the head, in that it will cost you a lot of money to put in a hydrogen station anywhere, or refueling depot. Right. And so if you have a smallish, say a suburban bus system, something like that, it's probably going to be cheaper and easier for you to just expand your electric capacity a little bit to accommodate a number of buses. They probably don't run quite as far, quite as many buses. But once you get into the triple digits types of depots, then you are more likely to see the one large hydrogen infrastructure piece be cheaper on a per bus basis or per truck basis than adding ever more capacity, which will start to mean substation expansions and so forth. So again, very complementary. There's no, I don't see the big need or the big drive to be like, I'm purer than you. But right. That's just kind of the way we are with everything. It's like, do solar guys and wind guys really, go at each other? Probably not. I'm sure that, given a few more years, a lot of people think that, fuel cells haven't proven themselves yet. Give them a few more years to get a bit more respectability. We'll find some happy, ceasefire type medium where, yeah, you guys are strong here, you guys are strong here. We can hit fossil fuel consumption, in a pincher movement. And just the analogy I like to use, and I'm not sure if you're recording the video, but if you think of like a lobster claw, I'm going to try and illustrate it here. Yeah. You can imagine that like the batteries and electricity are here, the big portion. So there are a lot more small vehicles than large vehicles, and then hydrogen and fuel cells give you the smaller portion of the lobster claw. It's not like they're in competition, but they have different roles to play, and we want to floor the accelerator for both of them.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, it's absolutely totally on point, because the sort of tribalism that we see in motor vehicle owners, I have a hybrid, I have a plug-in hybrid, I have an EV. There's sort of a caste system almost, that I'm better than you, and I'm better. Not, we're all doing better than we used to do. There's very little celebration of that, Right. And that's what we need we need that same diversity that we have in power generation.
Right.
Whether it's geothermal, wind, or solar, or whatever it is. If it's better than what we used to use, that is the direction we need to head. Fair
Right.
enough?
And if I can just, pump my own writing as well, I had a piece called, I think, The People's Front of Efficiency from that old Monty Python skit about this internecine warfare, between different zero emission technologies. And I think my big takeaway from that, running the numbers, is that I think really, if I was to bet something on what takes over the world in, say, 40 years, I would put my money on some sort of electric scooter micromobility thing.
Sure.
Because already in Vancouver, very progressive city, environmental, lots of goals, already car traffic is identified as the enemy. So if you're a combustion vehicle, you are the worst of the worst, the 10th circle of hell or whatever. If you're an electric vehicle, you're still considered a bad guy because you're creating congestion. You're taking up space, you're putting in traffic. So you're like maybe fifth circle of hell. Whereas the real goal is like cycling, e-bikes, and public transit. And so I guess one thing I would offer to battery only enthusiasts is that, yeah, battery only is probably going to be the way, but it's probably going to be in scooters or some form of smaller, more compact transport or public transport. You're no longer, BEVs, passenger vehicles are no longer the halo. The halo has moved.
Sure.
And the sooner that as a community we can get used to that, the less, you don't want to be fighting two fronts in terms of like dissing fuel cells and then attacking scooters for being, impractical or not enough range or doesn't keep you dry in the wet weather, because they will use the exact same arguments that EV enthusiasts used 10 years ago with a shorter range Leaf to say, no, we're the best. So I think that it'll be an even more interesting next 10 years now in the zero emission transport space. And I look forward to chuckling as some insults get lobbed between scooter people and battery electric vehicle people for who has the crown of the best person, who is the purest.
Yeah, I hate that contest, but I do have to acknowledge that it drives the conversation in the right direction in some ways. Do you really need that car, or could you do it on a bike?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so one of the core questions that has always bothered us on What Drives Us is, where does the hydrogen come from?
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid concern. So back when I started working on fuel cells in about 99 or 97, something like that, I did a little internship. Wow. The idea was that, well, wind and solar are never going to be much, so we better go to natural gas. And even today, the cheapest source of hydrogen is from natural gas. This is particularly true in North America, where you have shale gas in the States. And if you think natural gas prices are cheap in the States, you should come to Canada, because we have landlocked natural gas where we are. So we regularly have, 1/2 to 1/3 the Henry Hub natural gas price, like very cheap, phenomenally cheap. Now, in the near term, the cheapest source of hydrogen is natural gas. In the near term, still for a number of years, it will be cheaper to take that hydrogen, to strip it off, to reform it off the natural gas and bury the carbon, than to use renewable electricity to generate the hydrogen. But that will change. And so give it maybe 20 years or so, and then the likelihood is that renewable energy will be so cheap and available, with some augmented by battery or other storage capacity, that you can run electrolyzers to generate hydrogen off that electricity reasonably 24/7-ish, 80 to 90% of the year. You turn it off when there are price spikes, of course, because you don't want to use expensive electricity during a heat wave, say.
Sure.
But you will make the hydrogen through renewables, again, less efficient than directly charging a car, but, and this is one massive thing that is overlooked, is that hydrogen isn't just useful as a fuel. It's an industrial feedstock for many chemicals. If you think about making fertilizer, the ammonia, a lot of hydrogen there, currently pulled off natural gas. You can undercut that with hydrogen from renewables pretty soon. Hydrogen can also replace coal, coking coal, in the making of steel, reducing iron ore.
Oh.
And finally, in an energy perspective, we're going to need to build a lot more of a high voltage transmission, across the states, across Canada, across the world, to take full advantage of renewable electricity. One of the challenges is that for whatever reason, a lot of communities, even pro-renewables communities, don't like high voltage transmission lines going through their neighborhoods or their counties. That will be kind of a drawback. I suspect that you're more likely to get hydrogen pipelines approved faster for whatever reason, because if you're used to a dirty pipeline in an area, you'll probably take a clean pipeline, especially if it means that in 20 years you can pull out and rip out that fossil one. Another implication is that we're not going to be wiring electricity under the Pacific Ocean to Japan and China, where anyone with a drone submersible can cut that line untraceably. Satellites can't see 10,000 meters into the ocean. Right now, Japan gets more than 95% of its primary energy from imported fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, oil. And, given the problems they've had nuclear-wise, I'm part Japanese, they're not going to be expanding that anytime soon. And a similar thing holds, not quite as bad for South Korea, but also China is also very dependent on imports of fuel. They're not going to get that with electrons. They're going to use molecules. And the only zero-emission option will be hydrogen generated cleanly. I had helped with a study earlier this year for the province of British Columbia, how hydrogen can help the province meet its climate goals. Not claiming it'll be the number one thing, of course, but one of the quivers in the arrows in the quiver. And there had been work earlier this year to evaluate how commercially feasible would it be to take our relatively cheap electricity, generate hydrogen, and ship it to Japan. Because in the short term, you can blend it in with natural gas burners and natural gas systems. And in the longer term, you can just convert them over. You have a natural gas turbine or a coal facility. Give it enough years, you can design a new turbine, a new combustion system, use hydrogen, zero emissions. That is the only way Japan can have any hope of meeting any decarbonization goals.
Wow.
So one message I would bring to battery advocates, and it is wonderful that we have many energetic and enthusiastic battery electric vehicle advocates, is that hydrogen is like a Lego brick. It can be used in many places. Personal transport, it's not going to dominate personal transport. Commercial transport, rail, perhaps marine, there's a lot of interest. Especially for these longer distances where batteries are kind of challenged to scale. Perfect complement. And then in decarbonizing industry, which is a big matter, and then decarbonizing the energy trade. Not to get all too nerdy, but
please.
From my university days studying like classical studies, whatever, ancient Greece and so forth. When the Bronze Age started, I think that's when they discovered how to smelt copper. Cyprus, from whose island name Cuprus is derived. So Cyprus had copper, and they basically deforested the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East to get wood for fuel, to get the copper for this magnificent new metalworking device, right? So we've been despoiling the environment for many thousands of years. We have been trading energy in one form or other for thousands of years. We're probably going to trade it for a good while longer. And in a similar case, electrons will be fantastic in certain contexts. If you have, Europe, there's no reason to turn to hydrogen before shipping it off between countries. If you're going to, pass an ocean or something, then you're probably going to be using hydrogen there. So, a very complementary aspect where there's no real need for backbiting or whatever.
So I know we're coming up on needing to let you go, and
Sure.
I want to respect that. But so the argument has long again been, and I'm going to repeat this, but
Sure.
So forgive me, that where the hydrogen comes from is no good.
Mm-hmm.
It uses fossil fuel. It uses too much energy. It's a net loss.
Right.
But what it does is create a fuel that is more portable than electricity can
That's
be
right.
with battery technology where it is. So I guess the future, if I'm hearing you right, is that we're gonna generate hydrogen through electrolysis, using renewable energy, using clean energy. And even though that math still doesn't change, it does make sense in certain applications. Is that
That's right.
a fair summation?
I think that's a good way to summarize it. Again, there's nothing wrong with being very efficient in how you use renewable electricity. Unless you happen to have solar panels on your rooftop, the electrons going into your electric vehicle are some mix of renewables and non-renewables right now. At the moment, yes, most hydrogen is generated from fossil fuels, from natural gas. That will change over time, and the faster we can get renewables down that cost curve and the more widespread, then the faster we'll be able to get to zero emission hydrogen as well.
Okay. I mean, for those of us that have been in this for a while, we've heard hydrogen's coming, we're waiting for a breakthrough. And that breakthrough, it hasn't come. Right. And that's okay, because the realization is that we just need to break down to create the hydrogen in a good way, in a
yeah. So I guess if you think about like the dot-com bubble, and I'm appreciative of the dot-com bubble because it allowed me to pay off student loans with like the one in the money round of stock options that I had. I barely got enough to pay off my student loans and get a fancy laptop. So back in the day, there was like pets.com or Webvan where it was like, oh, we're going to deliver your food for you. And that totally didn't work. It was a disaster. But now, Amazon's come back and Amazon is executing on that. In a similar way, hydrogen got its hype cycle way too early, like just way, way too early. It will be we should note that at the time, lithium-ion batteries were probably in the thousands of dollars per kilowatt hour cost. So it did make sense at the time for automakers to be very focused on that. But if you look at the cost curves for battery costs, and you look at the cost curves for manufacturing fuel cell stacks, they are actually following the same kind of roughly 20% cost reduction per cumulative worldwide doubling of volume. Maybe offline, I can send you a link that shows that. And so again, it's not so much a matter of needing a particular breakthrough. Improvements are certainly necessary. It's just that the fuel cell sector was so embryonic, so tiny, that it would be like lithium-ion batteries in the 90s, kind of. And so we are approaching the point where they will become cheap enough and commonplace enough to start to seem like a real thing. And I can appreciate a lot of people are kind of skeptical, because if you heard about some breakthrough 20 years ago and it's still not broken through, yeah, I can see the reason for skepticism. But I'll forward you that link. It is.
I'd love to see that.
It illustrates that, again, it got hyped up way too early, but it is gradually executing along that scale. And hopefully that can play as big a part from the other end of the pincher movement from batteries, so we can move past fossil fuels and try and avoid a nightmarish environment for our genetic descendants.
Yeah, who allegedly we have some concern about.
Yes, allegedly, yes. But not a week ago, my lifestyle.
Right. A week ago today, I was here.
Oh, cool.
This was the Toyota Alt Fuel event where they introduced the new Mirai.
Oh, yes.
And I was actually one of the few idiots who wrote a positive review of the first Mirai, even though I wasn't a big hydrogen fan. I thought it was a great car. Anyway, so this is all dovetailing into stuff that's all happening this week. Those videos are going to come out. This interview is going to come out. And Matthew, thank you so much for spending the time and chatting with me.
You're very welcome. Happy to to follow up as needed.
I would love to do this again, at least once more, if not many times, because you're a source of enormous, great information, and you articulate it very, very well. I still have to, the halo has moved. Dude, that is the quote of the week. Just the idea of the technologies, because we tend to cling, like that. Yeah. Oh, my battery car is the best thing in the world. And it is maybe 10 years ago or maybe 5 years ago, but it won't be in 2025.
Right. Well, I mean,
It may
even
not.
even if and when the scooter people ascend to dominance,
Right.
the purest cyclists, the ones who aren't using any electricity, will be like,
Right.
oh no, 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 we are. So it's a never-ending game, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's
It's like regression. Is that then the person who hand makes a wooden bicycle in
right.
their home is better than the one who bought a metal one.
Yeah, or maybe a bit like Inception, where it's like, there's another layer that you have to discover or something, and yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It never ends. And that's sort of the bickering that I've never enjoyed about this. But
Right.
Matthew, thank you again so much for
You're
spending the
so
time to
welcome,
do this.
Russell, and happy to help whenever I can.
Oh, careful or I'll, yeah. I want you on the show every week. How's that? He's like,
Sure, I'll ask my wife.
yeah, no. I know the answer to that question and it's
Right.
no, but we will definitely have you on again. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Klippenstein, he is at electron.com. That's COMM. He is a must follow on Twitter and read his articles. Now, do you regularly write for The Drive or just sort of
I have
freelance?
written for them. I guess right now I write mainly for the National Observer. I will have some other pieces coming out, but if they find my Twitter handle, electroncom, COMM, then you'll see the links and whatnot to that. So
there you go. Yeah, and like I said, follow him on Twitter because you might learn a thing or two or 10 like me.
right.
Matthew, thank you so much. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
you're very
And we will tune in next time to find out what drives us.